interrupted debate on the Prime Minister's statement.
When the debate was adjourned, or the movement of the adjournment to the debate was by the Honourable Nathan Guy, he therefore may speak first and has 10 minutes. The Honourable
Mr Speaker, thank goodness for John Key. Just over a week ago, the Prime Minister rolled out his prime ministerial statement to the House. A big, bold vision for New Zealand to get our economy moving again. And the Labor opposition leader, Phil Goff, thinks now it's an appropriate time to say that he doesn't support GST, when we know, when we've trolled back through the archives here in this place and the Hansard records, that indeed he did support a GST rise when he was in the Cabinet at the time of the 1980s. I have sat, Mr Speaker, through 5 of these addresses by former Prime Ministers and indeed our very good Prime Minister John Key. 3 of them under the former Prime Minister Helen Clark were very sleepy, dreary affairs. If you think about it, Mr Speaker, they struggled to make any traction on the 6 o'clock news. And we had in 2006 the first time that I heard Helen Clark in here talking about the buzzword economic transformation. That delivered nothing. And then in 2007, Helen Clark, her catchphrase was sustainability and also carbon neutrality. Struggled to deliver anything in 2007. And then, of course, in 2008, under Helen Clark, her speech from the Prime Minister's statement at the time was all about lifting living standards. And, of course, what happened in that year was the Labor government at the time upped the spending, increased debt, and, of course, forgot to mention the Electoral Finance Act. But now we have a very bold Prime Minister's statement delivered just over a week ago by the Honourable Prime Minister John Key, creating incentives for people to work hard, improve their skills and get ahead, encouraging savings to boost our productivity, Mr Speaker, and of course being fair to all New Zealanders. Another important thing is that there's a big part of this speech, Mr Speaker, focused around boosting infrastructure. And that is going to be a big program for this government this year and our very big work program as we carry on delivering that. And of course, of significance to my electorate up in Otaki is the road of national significance that has been celebrated from Wellington to Levin. And of course, $2.2 billion invested there, and indeed Transmission Gully part of that package, which has been meted with a huge amount of applause from my constituents in Kapiti and Horowhenua. We're also going to be focusing on ultra-fast broadband, $1.5 billion rolled out there into the homes of New Zealand. And a big part also of this speech, for those of you that are interested and listening today, is all about water storage, food innovation, more investments in research and development and science. And of course, if you think back to what we've heard from the opposition after the Prime Minister delivered his speech, we heard Phil Goff, the leader of the Labor Party, who criticised the national government of sitting on the sidelines last year through the recession period. And it's because of the prudent management of the Prime Minister John Key and indeed his Finance Minister Bill English that we managed to come through that period with some certainty and some confidence, because had we had Labor being in power then, we know that they would have wanted to spend more, Mr Speaker. We know that they would have wanted to borrow more, which would have racked up debt. And we know now, having sat through Mr Goff's speech, that they have very little ideas and no policy. Under the leadership of Phil Goff, we know full well it would have been just racket on the bill, Phil, down to the pixie in the back of the garden to see if we could print some more money.
Point of order. Point of order. Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, you may well have been distracted when an expression was used that was unparliamentary.
Yes, I did recall the member used a term which has been ruled out. All members are honourable members. and proper names will be used. Thank you.
And indeed, Mr Speaker, if we think about proper names, the Labor Party has indeed got a bit of an issue with trying to rebrand the image of the Labor Party leader, because they've tried to ramp up the leader as sort of bikey Phil, or indeed freezing worker Phil. I've seen the brochure that's come out. Blokey Phil, of course robotic Phil, and at times we've seen angry Phil. But nothing really works. It's hard for the Labor Party to connect.
Point of order.
Well, do I
Well, I did miss it.
Well, sorry, sir. I think about 7 times in the last couple of sentences the member has again breached your ruling.
The member will desist from using terminology which has been ruled out previously.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think it's worthwhile focusing now on this GST debate that is very, very important, how we're going to re-incentivise the economy and give more of people's hard-working money to get the wheels turning of the economy. And indeed, it's interesting when Mr Mallard wants to pull me up about criticising Phil Goff. I know that Labor struggled to take the medicine, but it is interesting if you think about
point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, this member used to be, I think, the senior whip. He knows that you cannot refer to a ruling that you have made or a matter on which you have ruled.
Well, you're speaking to the point
of order. Yes, I'm not at all referring to a ruling that you've just made. This is a very robust debate. It's a debate on the Prime Minister's statement, and I should be allowed to continue.
Yes, well, I didn't actually pick up the inference the Honourable Trevor Mallard made, but I have now attended to the matter which had occupied me, and I will be paying great attention to the member.
I can get a winner, sir. I was just alluding to the GST debate, Mr Speaker. When you think back to Phil Goff, I think it was 1986 when he delivered a speech in the House around GST, and he said that every New Zealander will be better off under the proposals announced last night. It introduces a fairer system for New Zealanders. It reduces the burden of personal taxes which wage and salary earners have to pay. A great little speech indeed by Phil Goff, but I think he's forgotten that message, so we'll be reminding him, of course, that Phil Goff was part of the Cabinet which raised GST in 1989 with no compensation for workers or beneficiaries. And I'm proud that the National-led government won't be doing those sort of dirty tactics. And of course, Phil Goff, the leader, he has some kind of amnesia over chief executive pay, doesn't he, Mr Speaker? He wants to pay our top public services servants less, but was part of the Cabinet which gave them huge pay increases. Maybe he was asleep at that particular part of the Cabinet meeting. And when it comes to the Labor Party's resentment to this side of the House, they resent effort and they resent success. Just look, Mr Speaker, at the national standards when Helen Clark was in opposition, rallying against those poor performing students in 1999. Said that it was shocking that 20% of our kids leave school unable to read and write to a decent standard. And of course she is right. She is right, it is shocking. But the Labor government had 9 years to sort that out, and now the national government's come in. Of course, what has happened over that period? Well, lo and behold, kids are still failing. There's still 20% of kids failing. That's why I'm publicly supporting Anne Tolley and the great work that she's doing in the introduction with the support of the Prime Minister and the whole of caucus, introducing national standards, so we can't afford for our kids to slip through the cracks. If we want a modern economy, Mr Speaker, we want our children to be able to perform, to get a job. But if we're not incentivising those kids to ensure they can read and write to a decent standard, they will continue to slip through the cracks. It's also worth commenting on about the bold program that we have. This is a very, very bold statement delivered by the Prime Minister. And I alluded to the fact before that I've sat through 5 of these speeches now. 2 have been fantastic, and I particularly applaud this one. The massive work program that the government has laid out